appreciate your time and I appreciate your being in this meeting. The objectives that we are going to target today are the red ones. And the first one is describe and reflect on the science of teaching reading, understand how language impacts student learning, and analyze how children develop reading skills. These blue objectives you're going to be working on your own. So we're going to start this meeting by taking a look at the scientific teaching of reading. There is a quote in here and it says, recent scientific studies have allowed us to understand more than ever before how literacy develops, why some children have difficulty, and what constitutes best instructional practice. Scientific evidence drives the claims that we have concerning reading, about how people learn to read and write. These claims are the ones that frame our instructional decisions. The degree of understanding that we have about these scientific claims make an impact on the instructional decisions we take in the classroom. The more we examine and the more we understand these scientific claims, the better our practice gets and the more sophisticated our teaching of reading gets. This week, we sent you this little Google form for you to complete, and it was about claims and actions. When we talk about claims and actions, we wanted to use this as a reflective piece. And I'm pretty sure that when you went over it, it made you reflect and think about what actions aligned to what claims. And when we completed it, we had a good insight on how my current practice relates to the claims and the beliefs that I have in reading instruction. I want you to keep in mind that we're going to be making some content area connections today, as reading and writing are connected to content area as well. I'll be listening to a read aloud of the story Ada Twist, Scientist. I would like us to think about this question. What do we learn from this book about what scientists do?
Ada Twist, Scientist by Andrea Beatty, illustrated by David Roberts. Read by Miss St. Germain. Ada Marie, said not a word till the day she turned 3. She bounced in her crib and looked all around, observing the world, but not making a sound. She learned how to climb and made her big break with a trail of chaos left in her wake. She ran through the day, chasing each sound and sight, and didn't slow down till she conked out at night. Her parents were frazzled but tried not to freak as Ada grew bigger and still did not speak. Clearly, young Ada, with lots in her head, would have something to say when it ought to be said. That's just what happened when Ada turned 3. She tore through the house on a fact-finding spree and climbed up the clock just as high as she could. Her parents yelled, "Stop!" as all good parents would. Ada's chin quivered, but she did not cry. She took a deep breath and she simply asked, "Why?" Why does it tick and why does it talk? Why don't we call it a granddaughter clock? Why are there pointy things stuck to a rose? Why are there hairs up inside of your nose? She started with why, and then what, how, and when. By bedtime, she came back to why once again. She drifted to sleep as her dazed parents smiled at the curious thoughts of their curious child, who wanted to know what the world was about. They kissed her and whispered, "You'll figure it out." Her parents kept up with their high-flying kid, whose questions and chaos both grew as she did. Even Miss Greer found her hands were quite full when young Ada's chaos wreaked havoc at school. But this much was clear about Miss Ada Twist. She had all the traits of a great scientist. Ada was busy that first day of spring testing the sounds that make mockingbirds sing when a horrible stench whacked her right in the nose, a pungent aroma that curled up her toes. "Zowie," said Ada, which got her to thinking, what is the source of that terrible stinking? How does a nose know there's something to smell? And does it stink if there's no nose to tell? She rattled off questions and tapped on her chin. She'd start at the start, where she ought to begin. A mystery, a riddle, a puzzle, a quest. That was the moment that Ada loved best. Ada did research to learn all she could of smelling and smells, both the stinky and good. One hypothesis Ada thought could be true. The terrible stink came from Dad's cabbage stew. She tested and tested, but soon Ada knew it was time to come up with hypothesis 2. Then zowie, the stink struck again, just like that. Hypothesis 2. It's caused by the cat. The cat couldn't make such a stink on its own. It needed perfume and some fancy cologne. So young Ada tested. The test was a flop. She started again, but her parents yelled, "Stop!" Ada Marie, to the thinking chair now, by the time we count 3. "Enough," said her mother. "That's it," said her dad. Her parents were frustrated, frazzled, and mad. "Why?" Ada questioned. Her mother said, "No." "What?" Ada queried. Her father said, "Go. You've ruined our supper. You've made the cat stink. Enough with your questions. Now sit there and think." She looked at her parents. Her heart turned to goo. Poor Ada Twist didn't know what to do. She sat all alone by herself in the hall, and Ada once more could say nothing at all. And so Ada sat, and she sat, and she sat, and she thought about science and stew and the cat and how her experiments made such a big mess. Does it have to be so? Is that part of success? Are messes a problem? And while she was thinking, what was the source of that terrible stinking? Ada Marie did what scientists do. She asked a small question, and then she asked 2, and each one of those led her to 3 questions more, and some of those questions resulted in 4. As Ada got thinking, she really dug in. She scribbled her questions and tapped on her chin. She started at why, and then what, how, and when. At the end of the hall, she reached why once again. Her parents calmed down, and they came back to talk. They looked at the hallway and just had to gawk. No patch of bare paint could be seen on the wall. The thinking chair now was the great thinking hall. They watched their young daughter and sighed as they did. What would they do with this curious kid who wanted to know what the world was about? They smiled and whispered, "We'll figure it out." And that's what they did, because that's what you do. When your kid has a passion and a heart that is true, they remade their world. Now they're all in the act of helping young Ada sort fiction from fact. She asks lots of questions. How could she resist? It's all in the heart of a young scientist. And as for that smell, What can Ada Twist do but learn all she can with her friends in grade 2? Will they discover the stink that curls toes? Well, that is the question. And someday, who knows?
Just take a minute and tell me what you can tell about what scientists do. As we learn more about the science of teaching, it makes sense to think about what is the meaning of the word science. And the approach that we used is informed by the work of scientists. Here we have a process used by scientists that is comprised of a couple of spaces. And if you see, and you compare this with the scientific process that we often use in the elementary grade levels, there are some similarities to it. How does the scientific method relate to your work as a teacher? We are going to have a brief talk in the break rooms about this.
I think that working with kiddos in a special population, I'm constantly noticing things and having to observe. And sometimes I kind of make a hunch and then I have to observe and make sure, kind of follow through of, oh yeah, you know, I have noticed what that, you know, or when we're doing FBA or whatever, to kind of see, oh yeah, that is something I've noticed. And you know what, that is a trigger. Or when I'm looking at the goal data, kind of looking at, oh, did I miss something here? What do I need to go back and redo? Stuff like that. And when I taught gen ed, a lot of times, you know, when you're evaluating yourself as a teacher, if the kiddos all missed something on a test question, you know, it wasn't the kiddos, you know, it was the question or you missed something. I think that we are constantly doing that as teachers. We just don't realize that's what it is. Maybe.
Okay, the reading recommendations that you have been seeing in this module are based on several reports that have been published in the last 20 years. So these are pictures of those reports, and our reading practices are a compilation of these reports. Although we may hear some controversies about these reports drive our reading instruction and the work they add coherence to the work we do. We encourage you to browse through this one specifically that we have shared with you. You don't have to read it, but if you have the time, you can browse through it. It has really good information. We are actually going to be looking at an excerpt today. Because science is emphasized, let's look at one of the reports and its methods. This report that we have here, it's a compilation of studies. And when you look at the methods they used, they have, this is an excerpt from that booklet. And it reads, staff conducted a thorough literature search, identified studies that met protocol requirements, and then reviewed those studies using the WWC group design standards. There is a science to teaching reading, and the strategies and the approaches that we take in school are based on best practices and based on research conducted for the last 20 years. I will ask you to pull this document that we shared yesterday. These handouts that we are going to be seeing today are inviting us to consider 3 different methods used in the creation of the perspectives that we are currently studying in the Reading Academy. The first perspective is the perspective of the authors that compiled all these studies, and how did they come up with the recommendations we are studying in the Reading Academy. Right. Knowing the how and how they got to these conclusions and recommendations will help you to foster conversations with colleagues, administrators, and also with parents about the science of teaching reading. Pull this document, and we want you to locate page 2. We want you to silently read this part that starts right here, and it's the explanation of research methods. Okay, so you took a minute to identify what parts of the scientist process were used through the compilation of these studies. As we look into perspective 2 into perspective 2 in that same document, we want to break into groups again. We're going to give you around 10 minutes to read perspective 2. Perspective 2 will start in page 3. It'll go through 4 and 5. So take a minute to read it. Here, you can take a picture. If you downloaded it from yesterday, you can use it. If you have the version that you can type on, you can do that too. So individually, think and make notes about your teaching actions that fit on the figure of the scientist process. Then fill in the third column on the table and together talk about what you noticed. What comments or questions do you have? So we're going to take 10 minutes to read through, to complete the table. Then we're coming back and I want you to choose a leader that can synthesize all the discussion and drop it in the chat rooms. Okay, for the people are here, we are coming back. I'm glad that you got to have some good conversations. We just want to close this presentation reminding you that we are going to go through the different reading components in the Academy modules. And in this module, the second part of this module, you'll be seeing the how. How do we teach the science of reading? If you have any questions, you just feel free to email us. Tara, do we have any questions today? It seems like we don't have specific questions. Okay, have a great day, everybody.